Vice President Kamala Harris is receiving a groundswell of support from black voters. On Sunday night, 45,000 black women took part in an hours-long call to organize for Harris. And last night, political strategists and groups, including Win with Black Men and the Collective Political Action Committee, both dedicated to growing black political power, came together for a Black Men for Harris call. Win with Black Men has raised over $1 million to support Harris and the collective PAC. Renowned film director Spike Lee came out in support of Harris, posting on Instagram, "Once again, a sister comes to the rescue." But Kamala Harris's race is already becoming an issue for the right. Representative Tim Burchett attacked her as a, quote, DEI hire.
Biden said, first off, he said he's going to hire a black female for vice president, and that he just skipped over. What about white females? What about any other group? When you go down that route, you take mediocrity, and that's what they have right now as a vice president.
Are you suggesting she was a DEI hire?
100%. She was a DEI hire. He said he was going to hire, and she didn't. Her record is abysmal at best.
I mean, to his point,
Which one, Robbie?
Well, she was picked for the role of vice president as his running mate because she was a black woman. I mean, that's explicit,
also
right?
Also because she was qualified, though. That's
the
part that they leave out, is there's a whole pool of qualified black women, and among those he chose Kamala Harris.
Well, qualified is something we can argue about. There was a lot of qualified people. There were a lot of people running for president at the time. Amy Klobuchar, Mayor Pete, Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders was the runner-up in the race. He was the one who performed second best, and he was the one who lasted in the debates longest against Joe Biden. He was the runner-up in the previous election cycle, and there was no question of Biden choosing him to be his running mate. That was forbidden because he was not a black woman.
No, it was forbidden because he's a socialist, Robbie.
That's not the reason they said they weren't going to pick it. I mean, you could. Fine. Then in that case, if you're arguing that the Democratic elites were unwilling to have someone who was genuinely left on the ticket, I would agree with you.
Yes.
But their excuse was that, no, we need to pick a black woman. So that, I think, actually shows how DEI can get in the way of advancing a truly progressive. I mean, at the debates, they said, "Will you pick a black woman?" Or they said, at least, will you pick a woman? I think Joe Biden pledged to pick a black woman, and Bernie Sanders, I believe, said he would be extraordinarily likely to pick a woman, and maybe didn't commit himself to specifically a black woman. Look, that's the reason she was selected. I'm not saying she is unqualified to be president. You can say she's equally qualified as the other people, and thus the extra advantage. And also, it's not purely who is the most qualified. It's who makes the most compelling ticket in order to get people to vote for them. So you could make the argument that she was picked, or her race and gender was part of, running a winning campaign. Now, I know many progressives would say that, however, despite her being a black woman, does not make her necessarily popular with black people or women. Did she have any actual natural base of support among those groups? I don't know, but I think it is. I would agree that she was picked for those reasons.
I think we know now, considering they raised $1.5 million in the first Zoom call of 45,000 people and $1 million in the second Zoom call, and they were highly attended. I think she absolutely has the support of the black community, and I think Burchett's
there's
point,
no one else.
There's no one else.
I mean,
you think there's no other qualified black?
No. What I mean is she's not running. I mean, she's running against Donald Trump, but she's not. Yeah. She's not competing in a Democratic primary for the votes of people. She has totally sidestepped this entire process, given how this is going on. She has been thrust into this position now for the second time. She didn't do well when she ran for president 4 years ago, and then she was selected for the ticket. And now despite winning,
on that ticket, though. Isn't that?
Yeah,
important?
she won. She won, yeah. But again, she didn't win against other Democrats. It wasn't like Democrats all got together and decided who's the Democrat we want the most. It's Kamala Harris. That never took place. Didn't take place this time either.
That's not what they did with J.D. Vance either among the Republican Party. That's
I'm not saying he has some natural. I mean, he's not my favorite character either, but I think it's a fair knock on her that she has been thrust into this position because of her identity. I mean, that's true. It's just true.
But Burchett's point is that she's not qualified because she's a black woman, and that a white woman or a different candidate would have been more qualified.
I mean, if that's what he's saying, I disagree with it. I don't think she's unqualified because she's a black woman.
That's the argument they make.
Well,
they say DEI hires are picked because of their race and are therefore unqualified, which is ignoring the reality that there are a ton of qualified people, and among the entire pool of candidates, they pick some people because diversity is valuable.
Well, what makes you qualified in this case is kind of subjective, right? I mean, it's the subjective determination of the American people who makes for the most qualified person to be president. It's not like there's an entrance exam and whoever scores the highest becomes the president. That when people complain about DEI in that context, what they're frustrated with is that if you have people who, for instance, for college admissions, score lower on the entrance exams or have lower grades, but are selected for admission over other candidates because of extra consideration for people of their race or some other factor, that is what is irritating. Or in hiring, that's what people complain about in DEI. You're right that in elective politics, it's not some objective criteria that is being met. It's just the judgment of the American people. So.
Right, and I think that they're more likely to like someone who's been a public servant, who was a corporate prosecutor, and then who was a U.S. senator, and then who was the attorney general, and has been serving in public office for over 2 decades, versus J.D. Vance, who has only served in the Senate for a year and change. So I think that when we compare the criticisms of J.D. Vance and Kamala Harris, why is Burchett not worried that J.D. Vance is picked as a DEI hire? What? Because he has a working class background? He wrote a best-selling book. That's what he did to get this job.
Yeah,
Kamala Harris has years of public service.
I don't think J.D. Vance was picked to balance the ticket or for diversity reasons. Obviously, he's not. Actually, he's really not dissimilar from Trump in terms of his ideology and who
diversity.
He speaks to. Yeah, look, they're both very wealthy men. J.D. Vance comes from a very extremely humble background, as his book is all about, and he really pulled himself up by his bootstraps and then made a lot of money in venture capitalism and is now very wealthy and entered the Senate and has not been there very long. Sure, that's his background. I mean, if the American people think the duration of time in public service in government is the compelling attribute, then yes, Kamala Harris is more qualified than J.D. Vance, although no one can match Joe Biden's decades and decades and decades in government. That has not necessarily made him, I think, a popular figure. I think the American people often think government is dysfunctional, and people who've been in it a long time are captured by it or are not interested in fixing the problems, and they want outsiders to the process. So
I agree, totally.
Yeah.
But Burchett criticizing Kamala Harris for being a DEI pick is ridiculous, given the current comparison.
No, I guess I disagree. Anyway, yes, she's certainly raking in a lot of money. That was the most explicit reason for Biden to be swapped out for Harris, is that the donors had stopped giving and had indicated they would not give any more money to Joe Biden. And so they got their way, and now they have Kamala Harris, and the money is flowing again.
These are small dollar donors, Robbie. This is an average donation of $37.50 among that group of 45,000 women in the call who fundraised $1.5 million. These are not the donors who are withdrawing their support for the Democrats unless they switch the candidate.
It's not these donors, but those people are going to be writing checks again.
Yeah, these are not the elites.
She's the choice of the elites.
She's brought a lot of popular excitement among Gen Z, among black voters that were maybe unlikely to turn out at all. And so I think that's really good. And I think there's a lot of time for J.D. Vance's whole shtick of being a working class guy who fights for working class people to be exposed. I mean, when he was running in 2022, I made a TikTok that got 2 million views that was exposing J.D. Vance for the same thing. He still got elected in Ohio, but I think now we have a lot more time to reflect on that record and not just say J.D. Vance is a guy who is perfect for the Republicans, because he's a working class guy who's willing to sell this message that Republicans are the best for working class people. Trust me, I'm just like you, when in reality, his biggest donors are big tech. He was a venture capitalist, and he's selling working class people out to policies that benefit the elites.
More Rising right after this.